Perimeters feel safe. Gates, passwords, badges, logins, firewalls, all of them tell a story we desperately want to believe. If we keep the danger outside, everything inside will be fine. That comforting idea shaped decades of design decisions across industries, from construction to healthcare to cloud computing. But as systems grew more interconnected and environments more open, the truth became impossible to ignore. Perimeters are fragile, temporary, permeable, and easily bypassed. Worse, when a system relies entirely on that perimeter, its interior becomes soft, over-trusted, and catastrophically vulnerable. Consider the world of heavy equipment. Picture a suburban construction site at dawn. A chain-link fence has bent in a windstorm, opening a corner of the lot. A teenager walking to school notices a bright yellow loader sitting unattended, frost still clinging to its hydraulic arms. As a joke, he once bought a universal Caterpillar key online for $10. Now, out of curiosity, he tries it. The machine starts immediately. There is no alarm, no authentication, no operator validation, just a universal ignition system designed under the assumption that only trained workers ever get near the equipment. Once machinery migrated from controlled quarries into exposed neighborhoods and roadside projects, the perimeter dissolved and the entire security model collapsed with it. A lock that works only if the fence is perfect is not a lock, it is wishful thinking in brass form. Hospitals fall for a different version of the same trap. An ER nurse battling a chaotic shift logs into a shared clinical workstation account because individual logins slow down triage. Somewhere nearby, a forgotten infusion pump with outdated security protocols sits on the same network. A ransomware operator halfway around the world exploits that single shared session, slipping through the pump into the hospital's internal systems like a burglar finding every interior door unlocked. Because the institution trusted the walls of the building as the boundary of safety, once an attacker crossed that invisible line, they had unfettered access to patient data, imaging systems, medication cabinets, and lab equipment. Life-critical environments cannot afford to rely on the building itself as the guardian of internal trust, but many still do. Corporate networks repeat the same mistake at scale. A finance department employee receives a phishing email disguised as an internal SharePoint alert. She logs in thinking nothing happened, but in that moment, an attacker gains an authenticated foothold. The company's internal network is a wide-open, plain servers, file systems, backups, and domain controllers, all implicitly trust anything with a corporate IP address. The attacker moves laterally within minutes, treating the environment like a single, unsegmented room. Major industry-shaking breaches occurred exactly this way, because one compromised credential was allowed to bypass an entire fortress. A moat without inner walls is not a castle, it is merely a courtyard with illusions of grandeur. The same dynamic appears in smart homes, albeit in miniature. A family gives a visiting friend the Wi-Fi password, and their outdated router, still running default credentials, quietly opens the door. The guest's compromised phone begins scanning the local network and discovers a treasure trove. Cameras, thermostats, baby monitors, all of them trusting anything inside the LAN. Consumer IoT devices cling to a nostalgic fantasy of the home network as a private sanctuary. In reality, modern home networks are porous and chaotic, and the perimeter protecting them is often a flimsy plastic box with decade-old firmware. Once the router falls, every device inside collapses with it. Industrial control systems suffer from their own mythology, the air gap. At a water utility, operators will proudly insist their critical infrastructure is isolated from the internet. But the moment a contractor shows up to do some routine maintenance, he just plugs in his everyday laptop, the same one he uses in airports, hotels, and coffee shops. And just like that, malware leaps onto the control system without any resistance. The truth is, real air gaps are expensive and inconvenient, so most organizations just settle for what you might call air gap theater instead. A separation that exists only on paperwork is no separation at all. It's just a comforting fiction folks maintain until the day it finally fails. Even physical infrastructure, the kind that's bolted right onto street corners and sidewalks, falls victim to the perimeter fallacy. A hobbyist goes online and buys a standard municipal access key, the same type that's handed out to technicians and city workers all over the region. One evening, he gives it a try on a traffic control cabinet at a quiet intersection. The panel just swings open, no resistance at all, exposing the timing controls for the entire signal system. These access systems were really designed for operational convenience, just assuming that only authorized workers would ever get close enough to reach the hardware. But the hardware lives out in public space, which makes the perimeter not just weak, but conceptually non-existent. When the outside world touches your attack surface directly, refusing to authenticate internally is not efficiency, it is negligence. Cloud environments, despite their sophistication, are just as vulnerable to convenience. A developer debugging an issue grants an automation tool full read and write access to the company's cloud storage just temporarily. The API key later leaks into a public GitHub repository and an attacker finds it. In a world where identity is the perimeter, one leaked token becomes an all-access pass to production databases, logs, dashboards, and deployment pipelines. Cloud security is built on the principle of least privilege, but many organizations still operate as though a single role with universal powers is a harmless shortcut. In a world where credentials travel as easily as copy and paste, that shortcut becomes an existential risk. Physical security shares its own version of the convenience problem. At a university campus, a maintenance worker carries a master key that opens every dorm room, office, and classroom. During a local news interview about facility renovations, a camera inadvertently captures a close-up of the key's bidding pattern. A viewer pauses the frame, takes a screenshot, and orders a working duplicate online. Master keys are inherently dangerous because they collapse interior segmentation into a single point of failure. If one key unlocks everything, then eventually that key will exist in the wrong hands, not as a matter of possibility, but as a matter of mathematical certainty. Even shipping and logistics environments are not immune. In a busy yard, all tractor units use the same PIN code for convenience. Drivers cycle in and out, contractors come and go, and no one remembers who first set the code. One night, an insider escorts a friend inside. They quietly reposition containers, open trailers, and create a perfect smuggling lane, all without breaking a single physical lock. The yard's security model assumed that crossing the gate was itself authentication. Once the perimeter was breached by proximity or deception, the entire interior was defenseless. Across all these stories, a clear pattern emerges. Attackers innovate, insiders exist, convenience always creeps back in, and misconfigurations never die. Any security model that assumes the perimeter is perfect will inevitably fail, because its interior is never designed to withstand an intruder. The Caterpillar Universal Key fiasco is simply a heavy, loud, steel-clad demonstration of a universal truth that spans industries. Trusting the fence more than the engine is not security. Trusting the badge more than internal controls is not security. Trusting the network more than the device is not security. And trusting a comforting illusion more than a sound principle is not security. Real security assumes the perimeter will break, because sooner or later it will.